Yes. So let's wait for others to join in. Let's take a minute and then we'll continue from where we left.
Sir, I'm unable to hear you.
आप म्यूट पे बोल रहे हो शायद.
Your microphone is muted.
ओहो, बड़ा जल्दी बताया आप लोगों ने. I wish you told me earlier and I'm continuously talking since then. हाँ, कब से म्यूट
I
हूँ?
thought-
स्टार्टिंग से ही.
हाँ
सर
सर मुझे
स्टार्टिंग से वो दोबारा से रिकनेक्ट किया है.
हाँ, उसके बाद ज्वाइन करने का. ओहो, you could have told me. I'm sorry. Professors are bound to be forgetful, so bear with me in that case, right? Okay, I'll come back again to what I said by now. So we understood this equation that the utility when it exceeds the price, we call it the consumer surplus, and the producer surplus is when price exceeds the cost of production, and both of them want to maximize their surplus. Now, how will they maximize their surplus? I said you do not have a control over increasing your utility initially. We'll study that in detail. How can you do that? Similarly, the producer doesn't have much control on the cost, so the only flexible point that you have is the price. And so the buyers want this price to go down and the seller wants this price to go up. And this is a tug of war situation that's happening. Now, who will win? That's the point. So that's where I was talking about these concepts, buyer's market and seller's market. Now, in economics, I was talking about that the primary thing that drives economics is the problem of scarcity. We call it the problem of scarcity. And I was sharing that economics differs from pure sciences in a lot of things, in a lot of ways. Like one example I gave you is that in physics, you might have studied for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Inertia, if you've read that, you would know that. But in reality, in social sciences, if you're dealing with human beings, every action that you do to certain people may not always result in the same and equal and opposite reaction from all of them. Different people may behave different manner. Similarly, in civics, when you understand larger the number of people, the more powerful they are, and policies are made like that. Voting and selection of governments and everything happens on the larger people supporting you. So that's more like the mobocracy thing that works. But in economics, everything becomes more valuable when it is scarce. Scarcity decides the value in exchange of a product or service more than the value in use. Actual value to important है, लेकिन scarcity makes things more dearer, more valuable in economics. So buyer's market कौन सी situation है? Buyer's market is a situation when there are lesser buyers than sellers. Number one, if there are lesser buyers and more sellers, now it does not mean in absolute terms. But in a big country like India, with a large number of buyers, but there could be a large number of sellers too. And if there are a large number of sellers, they would try to compete against one another. They would try to lure the customers by giving them better discounts, lower prices, and higher value or better features. So all that shows that when the buyers are more dominating or they are in lesser numbers, then we call it the buyer's market. But when there are lesser sellers or one strong seller dominates the market, and that's where the buyers, try to look for the best seller to buy their products, the sellers dominate the market and it becomes a seller's market. So in a buyer's market, what happens is obviously the buyers will have a greater control over the prices. They would expect more utility at the same price or a product of the same utility at a lower price. So the buyers can succeed in increasing their customer satisfaction by pulling down the prices. So it could be that if this is the utility, this is the price, and this is the cost, the buyers can pull down the prices from P to P1 and reduce the producer surplus, thereby keeping the consumer surplus higher. This is what buyer's surplus is or buyer's market is. On the other hand, if the seller market and the sellers are dominating and they are in a strong position, what they'll do is they'll push up the prices from P to P1, reduce the consumer surplus, and their surplus will be higher because this is the cost. Now, this is the seller's market, and the producer surplus increases in this case. Now, because this is a tug of war, what happens? One of them might be better off. And since this happens, the first macro aspect of economics has to be understood. So far, we are studying it from a mixed perspective, a general perspective. Now, at a micro level, if you understand, that's fine. Consumers are doing something, the sellers are doing something. At a macro level, if this continuously happens at a prolonged pace, that the consumers keep dominating the seller, what will happen is the prices in the economy will go down. Initially, the consumers will be very happy. The households and consumers will be very happy as per the circular flow. But the producers will slightly be depressed because of lower profits. So in the short run, it may seem good that the prices are low, people are happy, they are getting better, products for a lesser price. But in the longer run, it will affect both the entities because households and firms are both wheels of the same, vehicle in an economy. Why? Now, remember the circular flow. What happens? The producer's margins will squeeze, the consumer will be happy. But when the producer margins will squeeze, he is also paying factor services and factor payments to the consumer to the households. So he'll, because his margin is contracting, his profit is contracting, he would also reduce the rent, interest, wages, and salaries. And ultimately, this will also impact in the longer run the households which were enjoying further. And when their income reduces, right, even if the prices have gone down, their income reduces, and again the demand will go down. On the other hand, if the producers enjoy a producer's market and the producers enjoy a greater margin than the consumers, the producers are better off, they are making profits, prices are high, inflation is happening, consumers may not be very happy. But this hunky-dory situation for producers will also not sustain for a longer period of time. Why? Because when their profits increase, there are two things happening. When their profits increase, the factors of production will also ask for more rents, more wages, more interest, more salaries. Number one, because the cost of living is going high, the products are getting costlier. And what will happen as a result? The cost of production over a period of time will go up. So even if the price went up, the producer surplus increased, the cost will also go up, and again it will reduce the producer surplus. Second, because the prices were high, the demand would already start squeezing down. And so this margin gets common, and then again the situation comes under control. So this is what we are trying to tell from a neutral perspective, that high inflation is also not very good, but deflation may also not be a very healthy sign for an economy. So it's always good if the producers and consumer interests are kept at a balance within an economy so that the welfare can be maximized. So welfare means what? An economy has firms, an economy has households, and economy will only succeed when both firms and households are better off. If one dominates the other, it can be a little difficult in the longer run to survive. Now, in order to take them together, what do you need? You need a regulating body, because both of them are fighting a tug of war. So on one hand, you had the households, on the other hand, you had the firms. The roles and goals of these were very different. The role was of the consumption and production. The goal was that of utility maximization and profit maximization. And now you need a government or a regulator, a market regulator, in order to control both these entities. Now, the governments may not be perfect at doing that, but the fundamental principle said that you needed a regulator because people would try to rationalize and optimize their decisions, and there can be a chaos in the market. So if there is no control, if there is no regulation, it is the invisible hand of Adam Smith that works, that every household tries to try their best possible manner to get the maximum utility. The firms try their best manner to maximize profits, and generally things will optimize automatically. But if one or two people start dominating because of power or something, things can go haywire. So to ensure that welfare, you can assume that governments can improve the outcomes. However, macroeconomics principle says governments may sometimes improve the outcomes. All governments may not be good at optimally regulating the thing. And today governments are probably one of the reasons for biggest problems across the globe. But then again, that's how it is assumed. So now what the government does, it uses certain powers, certain policies, certain regulative mechanism to control a situation where either the households dominate the firms or the firms dominate the households, so that the economy stays in balance. And that's why, what is their role called? So the government plays the role of a regulator. We have already talked about other roles. So of the regulator, and the goal of the government can be what? The first is, obviously it wants the economy to grow, so we call it growth. Second is what we call as stability. They want the prices to be neither very high nor very low, because both the situations can be depressing and they can lead to business cycles, which we'll study in future. So the governments want that the business cycle should not be very drastic and very steep. Rather, there can be a balance brought about in economic growth, and we can have a much smoother economic growth in the country. So that growth with stability is what is the first goal. And the second goal we call is welfare maximization. Now, this goal is very synonymous to the kind of terms we were using here. The households wanted utility maximization, the firms wanted profit maximization, and the governments want to ensure that the interest of both the entities are balanced so that the welfare of the whole economy of the whole country is maintained. So that's how economics goes. Now, there could be more entities we can involve. We can also involve an entity called the capital markets or the banking system and the non-banking system, wherein the central bank, the commercial bank, and the non-banking institutions all collectively work, the stock markets and everything. And they are also a way of controlling the monetary flow in the economy. So the governments can use their fiscal policy, their other powers in order to regulate the system. If the demands are high, the prices are already, because of high demand, the prices are going high. There's a greater demand. The demand is exceeding. Let's say the demand is exceeding the supply. In order to discourage this demand a bit, they can exercise their contractionary policies, wherein they can exercise greater taxation, reduce the expenditure, and make sure that the supply side is improved and stuff like that. But the demand is discouraged, and that's what the government does through taxation and revenue collection, and that's where the government budgets and all this plays a very important role. On the other hand, there is a direct way of controlling things through, the indirect way of controlling things through the supply of money, and that's what we'll subsequently study in the role of the central banks. That they may play with the interest rates, they may play with the bank rates, they may play with the CRR, SLR, repo rate, reverse repo rate, and so many things, in order to ensure that the money, or the if the demand is high, they want to reduce the supply of money, they want to make money more dearer, they can increase the bank rate and interest rate. What will happen? You will like to invest your money in the bank rather than spending it, and the demand is discouraged. When the demand is low and the prices are low, the market is depressed, they would reduce the interest rates so that people take out money from the bank, they start spending. What we are seeing today is 3.5% interest rate in the bank. Many of you are finance people would understand that the FDs are not giving you enough returns, the rate of inflation is high. So majority of the people are being encouraged to bring out money to the market and spend. And that's the whole idea that the governments do, that they believe that the demand will create its own supply, which is the Keynesian model that the governments are using. Now, this is an expansionary policy where the government tries to start greater expenditures, reduce their taxation. However, this is not happening, particularly in India also. It's a mixed approach that's happening. But from the bank's perspective, when the market is depressed, they lower the interest rate so that there is, people take out money from the bank, start using them in the market, and the supply of money increases. So we'll talk about monetary policy and fiscal policy in detail later, because that's a smaller component of the pure syllabus of managerial economics. And major part of managerial economics is micro in nature. We'll talk about all that. So these are three. And then you have, if it is an open economy, this circular flow can also have the foreign nations or the foreign sector, which is the next sector, and you can have exports and imports happening with them, and there is a flow of money that's happening, which I have spoken in my video lecture that I've shared with you. We'll not go in detail with that. So this is a circular flow model wherein all these entities play a very important role. If this much is clear, we have understood the role of the government and the central bank is to regulate the whole flow by controlling the real and the monetary supply of money, and that's how they are regulating the basic business between households and firms. I hope this much is clear. If this is clear, I can then move on from basic economics to micro, macro, and managerial. So if you look at it from a neutral perspective, the whole picture that is there on your screen, I would call it economics. And if this economics is exercised or is studied or is executed from the perspective of the government, then I might call it a name called it's a kind of macroeconomics, but I may call it development economics. I may call it welfare economics, or I may even call it public finance, right? But when I'm studying it from the perspective of households, I may call it households, firms as individuals. I may call it microeconomics. If I'm studying it from the perspective of a business, a firm, that how it can maximize its profits, earn its revenues, earn a better goodwill, succeed over a period of time, ensure sustainability, keeping in view the households and the governments and other entities, then we may call it business economics, or we may call, so this is the macro part, this is the micro part, and in micro, this we call it as business economics or managerial economics. So business economics and managerial economics in Indian context, if you see, or in general, is just about the levels. When you apply economics to take better decisions for the business, we call it business economics. And when you study from managerial perspective the whole problem, from the approach of senior management, then the term becomes managerial. So it's slightly more a higher version of business economics. But in general, in India, you find that undergraduate courses call it business economics, and postgraduate courses we end up calling it managerial. But managerial economics involves an element of strategy to it, and it's applied economics for strategy purposes, for taking better decisions for survival, growth, and sustainability of businesses. So far, I hope this much is clear. So the principles of economics will remain the same. Growth, welfare, profit, utility maximization, all these are objectives. But when you study from the government's perspective, the goal becomes welfare maximization and growth and stability. When you study business or managerial economics, the goal becomes profit maximization, wealth maximization, revenue maximization, goodwill maximization stuff. When you study it from the household's perspective, the goal becomes utility maximization. So it depends on whose perspective you are studying economics, but in your course, when we are studying managerial economics, we'll be studying it from the perspective of the firm. You will be stepping into the shoes of the firm and the managers running that firm, and then see from their point of view how the whole economics looks. How do they negotiate with governments? How do they ensure that the government policies, the household's behavior, the central banking system, and the foreign sector behaves? And to deal with all these, you would be applying the concepts of economics, and this is what is called managerial economics. So managerial economics is a study of management concepts and practices along with the fundamentals, theories, and concepts of economics in order to take better decisions for firms. And that's what managerial economics is all about, right? Now, how do we do this? We have just taken a glimpse of the introductory glimpse of the whole thing. So we'll have subsequent sessions to talk about all those things in detail. But since it's an introductory class, I would also like to cover up some very important theoretical perspectives or slightly practical aspects of the first and the second unit of your SLM introductory part, so that in the next class I can straight away move to concepts, principles, analysis, and start with utility and all those aspects. So the last thing that I would like to talk about, from the theoretical perspective today is that the evolution of economics, because they're in your SLM, it's part of your course. I'm sure many of you might have done the studies on your own. It doesn't require much of explanation, but let me just tell you how economics moves from its initial years to what it is today. So the evolution of economics, if you see, has gone through different eras and different thought processes. Today the contemporary economics is far more complex, far more I would say mature in its understanding, but it all started from the time when Adam Smith, who we call as the father of economics in loose terms, or the initial proponent of the wealth era of economics. So that era was called the wealth era or wealth definition era of economics. And Adam Smith came up with the idea that economics, he understood the most initial aspect of economics wherein used the word wealth as the most important aspect. So he wrote a book that was an inquiry into the nature and causes of wealth of nations. And he said that every country, every nation wants to increase its wealth and maximize it for the welfare of its own and its people. And in that nation, every individual, every firm, every household also wants to optimize their wealth. And in this process, everyone tries to be better off. And if each person tries to be better off, the whole society gets better off. That was the idea. And he considered that wealth as an important aspect for or the reason for study of economics. So he talked about concepts like scarcity and value, and he said things which are scarce, they command more value, and they command more value, so they become articles of wealth. And so every country wants to have control over these scarce resources, which are called the source of value, power, and wealth. It can be knowledge, it can be innovation, it could be geographic resources, it could be something that has strategic value because of scarcity. And that's how economies create wealth for themselves. So the Western world went with branding, they went with innovations, they went with patents and IPs in order to make money. The developing countries had their own ways of doing things, but they all were focusing on creation of wealth. Then, over a period of time, it's just like it happens in the class. Somebody gives the answer. Giving the answer for the first time is challenging. And then based on shared wisdom, collaborative wisdom, people try to give, improvements to that answer. That's much easier. So over a period of time, from wealth era, we moved on to the welfare era, where people like Alfred Marshall, improved the whole idea. He said, no, when we only talk about wealth, which people even today use as a loose term, economics sounds as a dismal subject. Dismal means it's from the perspective of a very myopic perspective of making money, and we are undermining the importance of economics. Economics is for the purpose of welfare. People study economics not to just make money, but also to know how to spend that money to make themselves better off. It's a very simple thing. If we put somebody in with umpteenth amount of money in the bank, with the bank balance and everything, in an island, isolated and with nobody around and nothing to eat, you would not be able to do anything with the money that you have. So money is not the ultimate goal. It is not the ultimate end. It is just a means by which you will be able to satisfy your needs. हमने वो अभी पिछली first slide में पढ़ा भी था that money or resources will help you buy goods and services, and those goods and services will help you satisfy your needs and wants. So money is not the end, it is just the means. So the term became that wealth is a means to welfare, wealth as a means to welfare, and welfare is the end of all studies. So the welfare era brought human welfare at the limelight, and they said human welfare is the first purpose, and economics studies how wealth can be created in order to increase that welfare. And this focused on two things. While when the Adam Smith's era was talking about more of creation of wealth, this talked about earning and spending both. See, if you create a lot of wealth, you have a lot of money in your accounts, that alone is not sufficient. It's equally rational approach, not only earning money, but how to spend that money is also a rational problem. With many of you who have limited resources, sometimes when we were young, we had less money in our pocket, and let's say we went to McDonald's or KFC or Domino's. Now, what would you do as a rational individual? Imagine those struggling days when you were a child, limited pocket money. You would go there, you would see the price of everything that is there, and you would make some calculations in your mind. If I am hungry, I want something substantial to eat, but I have limited money. What is it that I can order which is cheaper but can fill my stomach? So probably I'll go for a wrap or a burger or something. But if money is not a concern and taste matters me more, I would go for something which may be costlier but is not as filling, and I may go for something which is more dearer to me. In the whole process, you make some calculations. If I buy a burger or I buy a wrap or I buy a puff, and at the same time I buy a cold drink along with it, how much would it cost me than buying a meal or an economy meal where I can club these things? Am I saving some money there? So that's a kind of implicit thing going on in your mind, some calculations going on in your mind, and that's where economics is actually playing implicitly or instinctively in your minds. Sometimes the decisions are good, you end up saving money, being better off, but sometimes something drastic happens. What happens? You save money, but the product that you order in order to optimize your solution, you don't like that product. So ultimately, it's a big loss. Not only you lost the money that you spent, you did not enjoy eating what you ate, it's all gone. So basic economics हम life में लगाते हैं. If you were to treat your friends, you would probably try to buy something where everybody is happy and yet you spend less. If you were going for your own leisure, you would have not been that serious about the spending and you could have enjoyed eating what you enjoyed the more. So all these are what? These are basic economics concepts going on in your mind. The same way, what you are trying to do is you're trying to improve the outcomes and make your life better off, not only in the short run, but also in the long run. That's what economics is all about. So Marshall said that economics deals with the problem of limited resources and unlimited wants. That's the problem. And people, in order to maximize their welfare, try to make sure that they are able to understand that wealth is a means to welfare and utilize their resources in a better manner. That was the whole idea of economics. And it talks about how people earn their resources and how people spend their resources. So while earning also, I have already shown in the process of production, investment, distribution, while earning resources, you optimally utilize your resource. What should I do where I can earn better profits? I can produce better products or services that people will buy. Where do I work where I'll get a better salary and a better environment and stuff? And on the other hand, when you spend your money, you again see what is it that I want in the short run, what is more important, what is it I can postpone, and how do I save money to buy better things in future. So you are both, while earning the money and while spending the money, you are seriously looking at optimally utilizing your resources. Then there was an era that came further, economics was further improved. There were a lot of people who came in the middle. You had John Maynard Keynes, you have Pigou, they gave their own different concepts like the measuring rod of money and stuff. But the primary contribution from the change in the era and approach comes from the scarcity era, where scarcity definition of economics came, and Lionel Robbins is accredited with a better understanding and focus on this aspect. And he used the term scarcity, alternate uses, as a very important aspect of economics in optimum utilization of resource. He said that economics is a science that deals with unlimited wants, limited resources, that means the problem of scarcity, and those limited resources having alternate uses, and people trying to strike a balance between the two in order to get themselves better off. So that's where the root cause of the problem was studied. So all three were right in their own manner. Adam Smith said, what is it about? It's about study of wealth, right? Why do we study it? Because wealth is, or how do we do that? So he talked about wealth is the means of welfare. We study how people earn their income and how an ordinary man, it's a study of ordinary man's business of life, how an ordinary man earns his income and how he spends it. मतलब आप और मैं अगर अपनी लाइफ को ही स्टडी करें कि हम पैसा कमाने के लिए और पैसा खर्च करने में क्या करते हैं रोज, that itself is a study of economics. And then Robbins gave us a reason why. What we study and how it happens is fine, but why do we need to study it? So that's where he said that because there are unlimited wants, limited resources, and each limited resource has alternate uses, we need to optimally utilize our resources in order to be better off. So that's where the scarcity principle came. Then there were further improvements, and by the time we reached the era of Samuelson, where growth and development, aspect of economics was understood from the macro perspective, and that's where, though Keynes and others also came up with concepts of inflation, business cycle, interest rates, and unemployment, and all those which you primarily study in macroeconomics, there was an era where Samuelson came up with a growth definition of economics, and he gave a very comprehensive definition. This is important from not only practical, everything that is theory and concept is also applicable practically, but from an examination perspective, many a times this growth definition plays a very important role. Why? Because it combines all these aspects of economics comprehensively. It comprehensively covers all these important aspects in a single definition. And that's where economics is explained in a much more elaborate manner. So I'm giving a kind of a close to perfect and generalized definition, which you can go through your SLMs and find that Samuelson said that economics is a study of how man and society, pay attention to this because I'll then be probably sharing a podcast with you where I have elaborated this definition, done a complete, detailed analysis of the definition for you to easily understand what economics is. And in the next class, I'll quickly cover that up. So please pay attention to what I'm saying last 5 minutes. Economics is a study of how man and society, or man or society, chooses or ends up choosing, with or without the use of money, to utilize their scarce productive resources and deploy them for production of goods and services for consumption by different sections of the society. So they produce these goods and services and distribute them for consumption by different sections of the society now or in the future, for consumption now or in the future. And this involves a cost benefit analysis. Now, if you look at this definition, it is comprehensively covering every aspect. In fact, those factors which were missed out, they were there in the introduction, but which were missed out here, have also been beautifully covered. What is he saying is, it's a study of man or society. Number one, we can study economics from an individual's perspective, and we can also study economics from the perspective of all the households, all the industry, all the firms, or the entire country together. and that is the macro. So it is both micro and macro in nature. That's the first thing we come to know out of it. Then how man and society choose or end up choosing. That's a beautiful word, that either economics can be studied to improve life. If you do not study it, it will still happen to your life. And वो कहते हैं जोर का झटका धीरे से लगे if you are prepared. So economics is about whether you choose. If you don't choose, the situations will turn up such a way that you will have to make a choice. Warren Buffett ने कहा था ना, if you spend your money without thinking on things that you don't really need, you may soon have to sell things that you desire. So अगर पैसे को ढंग से खर्च नहीं करोगे तो एक टाइम फ्यूचर में ऐसा आएगा, because your resources are scarce, कि अब पैसे की वैल्यू आपको समझ आने लगी. So you have to choose by choice or by compulsion. So you choose or end up choosing. What do you choose? That it's not necessarily that you have the resource called money. You can also use other resources like I talked about time, efforts, and other articles of wealth. So with or without the use of money, you can use your time, you can use your energy, you can use your knowledge as a resource to create wealth. So with or without the use of money, to utilize your scarce resources. कौन से scarce हैं आपके पास? Time है, efforts है, money है, wealth है, all those, knowledge है, degree है, all those aspects. Utilize these resources. अब हमने जो activities पढ़ी थी, to produce goods and services. कौन से? जो हमें नहीं चाहिए but society को चाहिए, क्योंकि हम उसको बेचकर ही, उसको sell कर ही उसके बदले में money earn कर पाएंगे. So goods and services, and distribute them for consumption by other people, whether they want to consume it now or in the future, and that's how you will be able to generate an income. And this cost benefit analysis, that by spending this much of resource, what will be my return on investment, will it be profitable? This study is called the study of economics. So it is including all aspects. It's including wealth. It is also studying other articles of wealth. It is also talking about the problem of scarcity when it is saying that you are utilizing your scarce productive resources. It is also talking about the cost benefit analysis, that you would make sure that these products which you are producing are bought by people. People need them, and you will be able to create or generate more funds after successfully selling those goods and services. It also talks about the problem of welfare of the people, in a way, when it says that not only the products you are producing will earn you money or returns, but at the same time you are producing goods for consumption of other people. So kisan jab anaj uga raha hai, I'm being a little blunt here. The idea is not that he's if we say, if I'm coming and taking a class and I say I'm born to teach you because I thought this is, unless I would have taught you, things would have not been the same, and I was born to teach and add wisdom to people. Sounds like a hypocritic sort of statement. The idea is people generally work for their own for their own resource generation first. They may decide what they are good at or what they can do, whether they have the resources. So some end up becoming teachers, some become farmers, some become politicians, some become policemen, some become lawyers, advocates, judges, and stuff. We are doing it for ourselves, but in this process, we end up helping other people by giving them those goods and services that they want. So a teacher works for his salary, earns money, but ends up passing on wisdom to a lot of people who want degrees and knowledge and qualifications. Similarly, a farmer would produce crop primarily for his consumption, and the extra crop to sell and trade off and get money to buy other goods which he cannot produce. In this process, he's helping us, the other sections of the society, in getting what they want. So implicitly, we end up benefiting others, and when others work for themselves, they end up benefiting us. So Steve Jobs made a mobile phone to sell that in the market, earn money, transform the way technology works. But the whole idea is it ended up making us better off by giving us a device that could help us increase our productivities. So you do things for yourself, primarily for your resource generation, for your own consumption, but you end up benefiting the society accidentally, or by a lot of thoughtful processes in a way. So that's where the welfare factor also comes. And the beauty of this definition is it includes all the aspects which I talked about: the production, the distribution, that is the connect between the producer and consumer, and consumption. And that's why it's considered to be the most holistic or comprehensive definition of economics. So today we'll close the introduction here. Tomorrow I'll go to the understanding of managerial economics, its principles and important decision-making tools, and then we'll move to the three problems of the economy and demand, production, cost, and profit analysis. That's how the course will run. Please revise all these concepts. We'll coordinate a day here, go through your SLM, go through the recordings, and I hope you've been able to understand the opening sessions of economics. Is that clear? If there are any doubts, I'll reconnect. We are in the last minute. If you have any queries, please feel free to ask that to me. Is everything clear by now?
Yes, sir.
Any queries? If there are queries, we'll reconnect. Otherwise, I'll end up here.
No queries, sir.
I hope you've understood